Welcome to the Leetcode Blind 75 solution series, where we'll be solving every blind 75 question in Rust. I will be going from top to bottom in the list where you can find at neetcode.io/practice. So before we begin, I'd like us to set up our workspace to solve Leetcode problem. So open your favorite text editor, and in your main.rs file, I have a dedicated folder for this. So a cargo, new, whatever you like, and then in the main.rs file, let's create a unit struct called solution. And this would help with preventing compiler errors whenever you save the file. So yeah, with that down, let's get into the question. For this video, we'll be solving question 1, contains duplicates. And the question says, given an array nums, return true if any value appears at least twice in the array, and false if every element is distinct. Okay, so what you're saying here is we have an array and then it has some elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's stop at 8. Okay, we should basically go through every element, and then whenever we if we do, or whenever we do hit a value that we have hit before, we will then return false, return true. So we should go through each element, and if we hit a value we have hit before, we return true, else we return false. And the only way we return false is if we go through the entire array and then don't hit a value twice, we return false. Okay, so there are a couple of ways we could do this. One is to have a different array, and then using a for loop, we iterate through each element of this array. Let's call this one the comparer. And then we iterate through each element here. And then if we see that the comparer contains this element, we return true, but if it does not contain, we put it inside. So if we, for example, this one is empty and this has 1, we see 1. Okay, comparer doesn't have 1, we add 1. We go to the next item, 2. Comparer doesn't have 2, we add 2. Next item, 3. Comparer doesn't have 3, we add 3. 4, like, and just keep going. If we eventually hit an item and comparer contains that item, we will just, return false. So let's implement this. First of all, we just copy the laid out solution, and then what we do is, just as we said, a for loop. Go through each array. We have, first of all, have a comparer array mutable equals to vec new vector. So vectors in Rust are just like arrays, but they are resizable. And then we then say if comparer dot contains, take a reference to I, we should do what? We should return true. And then if we go through every element and it does not contain, we return false. So yes, this basically done. Let's copy this. We first off save. Oh, if it does not, compare.push. We have to push I. My mistake. We have to push I. So if we don't add this line, we're going to keep, comparing against an empty array, and we don't want that. So we're going to have to push I. And now we save. Okay, so no issues from the compiler. It will be, and we run. So yeah, this should work. Oh, good, good, very good. Okay, now we could actually speed this up. We could make this better. We could use something in Rust called a hash set. A hash set. Let me increase the font size. Let's see, hash set. Okay, let me make it bold and let's use impact. Hash set. No, no, no. Arial. Hash sets. Yes. Okay. So we could use a hash set, and what a hash set is, it is simply a data structure which can only hold unique values. So if you try to put in a certain value twice, it will not. If you try to insert one particular value two times, it will not enter the hash set. Uh, let's do that. Let's use a hash set instead. So how are we going to use the hash set exactly? When we iterate through every element, when we iterate through every element inside the main array, we're going to try to push it into the hash set, and if the hash set rejects the push, we return true. But if we go through every element and the hash set does not reject the push, we return false. Okay, so let's implement that. Let's change this from compare to exists, and let's use a hash set. So the hash set can be found, exists, sorry. The hash set can be found in std collections and hash set. Good. New. Good. So for I in nums, this hash set has a method called insert. So for I in nums, we can remove this. Let's comment this out. Now for each element in nums, if exists dot insert. So as you can see from here, it says returns whether the value was newly inserted. It adds a value and returns if it was newly inserted. So if it is a new value, it returns true. If it's a duplicate value, it returns false. So now we try to insert the value, and if it's a duplicate value, this would return false. So we want to negate that. So if it's a duplicate value, this whole thing will evaluate to true, and then we can simply return true. Simple as that. Else, well, if we go through the entire array and still nothing, we can just return false instead. If we go through the entire array and this block is not triggered, we'll simply return false. So let's do that. Run. Okay, good. This also works very well. But now let's do this the Rust way. And what is the Rust way? We will use iterators. So instead of this for loop, we would be using iterators and the all method, which all iterators have, the all method. Let me show you how that looks like. So nums is a vector dot iter to return an iterator over this vector, and then dot all. Now this takes a closure, and this inside this closure we will just bring out the element which we will represent as E, and what would we like to check? Exists dot insert E. So now we are going to iterate through nums, and for everything, if this evaluates to true, it goes to the next one. If it evaluates to true, it keeps going to the next one. But whenever this comes out as false, whenever there is a duplicate value, this whole thing will stop and return false. So we also want to negate this. So whenever there is a duplicate value, this whole thing stops, returns false, but with the negation, it turns into true. And using the implicit return here, there is no need for the return statement. Just leave out the semicolon. So we return true if this evaluates to false if there is a duplicate, but if there's no duplicate and this evaluates to true, we return false, just like the question asked. And let's save. So make sure everything works, and let's Control C, Control V, run. So yeah, there you have it. There you have it. And when we submit, great, it works. The memory is a bit bad, but yes, as you can see, this works just fine. This is the most optimal method I can. Yeah, so that would be it for this video. See you in the next one.